something changed in you. You may not have a name for it yet. You may not even be sure when it started, but something shifted. Quietly, the way a door swings open without making a sound. And now the world you used to walk through feels like it belongs to someone else. That feeling is not random. It is not a glitch. It is not you falling apart. It is you waking up. And the question worth sitting with right now is this: what do you do when the life you've built for yourself no longer fits? Most people never ask that question. They feel the discomfort and they run from it. They fill the silence with noise. They stay busy. They convince themselves that if they just keep moving, the feeling will disappear. But you are here. And that tells me something about you already. This video is not about motivation. I am not going to tell you to chase your dreams or believe in yourself. What I am going to talk about is something older than that. Something quieter, the invisible process that happens inside a person before everything in their outer world begins to change. You have already begun. Now let us understand what that actually means. The old world stops fitting. There comes a moment in every person's life, though most people do not recognize it when it arrives, when the old way of living simply stops working, not because something dramatic happened, not because a disaster struck or a relationship collapsed or a job was lost. Sometimes none of those things happen at all. Sometimes everything on the outside looks completely fine. Decent income, a place to sleep, people who care about you, a routine that runs like clockwork. And yet underneath all of it, something is grinding, something is off, like a machine that still runs but makes a sound it was never supposed to make. That grinding is not a crisis, but it is a signal. And the people who learn to listen to it early are the ones who do not have to wait for everything to break before they begin to change. The feeling usually shows up quietly at first. You are sitting at a dinner table with people you have known for years, and something inside you feels far away. You are doing the work you trained for, or chose, or settled into, and your hands are going through the motions, but your mind is somewhere else entirely. You scroll through your life the way you scroll through content, quickly, looking for something, not sure what, moving on before you find it. You achieve the thing you said you wanted and feel a strange flatness where the satisfaction was supposed to be. You celebrate, and something inside you watches the celebration like a stranger at someone else's party. This is the feeling, and most people do everything they can to outrun it. They stay busier. They make bigger plans. They redecorate or relocate or reinvent their social circle. They convince themselves that the feeling is temporary, that it will pass, that it is just stress or tiredness or a phase. And sometimes those things help for a while. The distraction works. The new thing brings a fresh energy, but the feeling comes back. It always comes back, because it is not caused by your circumstances. It is caused by the distance between who you actually are and who you have been living as. That is the real source of the grinding, not the job, not the relationship, not the city, or the bank account or the family. The source is you, or rather, the gap between the you that exists underneath everything and the you that gets performed every single day for the benefit of everyone around you. You have been performing for a long time. Most people have. It starts young. You learn very quickly what version of you gets approval, what version gets love, what version makes things easier and smoother and less complicated. And so you build that version. You build it carefully, brick by brick, year by year. You get good at it. Some people get so good at it that they forget it is a performance at all. They forget that underneath the role, there is a person who was never asked what they actually wanted. A person who was shaped by everyone else's needs and expectations before they ever had the chance to ask their own questions. And then one day, maybe gradually, maybe suddenly, that person starts knocking from the inside. The knocking is the grinding you feel, the sense that something does not fit, the restlessness that will not be reasoned away, the strange sadness that visits on perfectly ordinary days for no obvious reason. The part of you that looks at your own life and thinks, quietly, without wanting to think it, This is not it. That thought is not ingratitude. It is not weakness. It is not a sign that something is wrong with you. It is actually one of the most important thoughts a human being can have, because it means the real you, the one underneath the performance, is still alive, still awake, still refusing to accept a life that was built around everyone else's comfort rather than your own truth. The old world stops fitting because you grew, not because you failed it, not because it was wrong to begin with, but because you are not the same person you were when you built it. People change, quietly, continuously, beneath the surface of their daily lives. The values shift, the questions deepen, the things that used to feel like enough begin to reveal their limits, and the self that was satisfied with the old answers starts asking new ones that the old framework simply cannot hold. Think of it like a tree. When a tree is young, you can shape it easily, bend it in any direction, train it to grow a certain way, but the tree keeps growing, and eventually the shape it was forced into becomes a constraint. The bark starts cracking where it was bent. The roots push through whatever was holding them, not because the tree is being difficult, because life does not stop growing to accommodate the shape someone else decided it should take. You are the tree, and the cracking you feel is not damage. It is growth pushing against a container that was never designed for where you are going. The hardest part of this is that the old world is not always obviously wrong. It is not always painful or toxic or clearly something to escape. Sometimes it is just small. Sometimes it is just a life built on who you used to be, rather than who you are becoming. And leaving something that is small but familiar feels far more complicated than leaving something that is clearly broken. Because at least if it were broken, people would understand. But try explaining to someone that you need to change your life, not because anything is wrong, exactly, but because something deeper in you knows that this is not where you belong anymore. And you will quickly learn that most people do not have language for that. Most people will try to talk you out of it. They will list all the reasons the old world is fine. They will call your restlessness ungrateful or impractical or a phase. Do not argue with them. They are not wrong from where they are standing. They simply cannot see what you can feel. The old world stopped fitting. That is not a tragedy. That is the beginning of something, the first honest moment in a long performance, the first crack of light in a room that has been dark for a while. You do not need to know what comes next. You do not need to have a plan or an answer or a destination. You only need to stop pretending that the costume still fits. Stop pulling it tighter every morning and calling that comfort. Stop performing the old life so convincingly that even you forget it is a performance. The moment you stop pretending, the moment you let yourself fully feel that this does not fit anymore, something in you exhales. Something settles, not because the situation changed, because the honesty arrived, and honesty, even when it is uncomfortable, is always lighter than the weight of a life lived as someone you are not. That exhale is the beginning, not of the answer, but of the real question. And a real question, finally asked, is already a kind of freedom, the noise that keeps you asleep. Before anything real can grow inside you, you have to understand what has been keeping the seeds dormant. Because the seeds are there. They have always been there. The desire to live differently, to feel more awake, to stop going through the motions and actually mean the life you are living. That desire did not arrive from nowhere. It is original to you. It is part of what you came with. But something has been sitting on top of it for a very long time, keeping it from breaking through the surface. That something is noise. Not noise in the simple sense of loud sounds. I mean the noise that lives inside your head even when the room is completely silent. The noise that starts the moment you open your eyes in the morning and does not stop until you are too exhausted to keep it going at night. The running commentary, the constant evaluation, the replaying of old conversations, the rehearsing of future ones, the comparing and calculating and worrying and planning and second-guessing, that fills every available space in your mind from the moment you wake until the moment you finally briefly go quiet in sleep. This noise feels normal because you have lived inside it for so long. It feels like thinking, but most of it is not thinking. Most of it is static. Most of it is the accumulated sound of every opinion you ever absorbed, every fear you ever learned, every expectation that was placed on you before you were old enough to question it. It is not your voice. It is a chorus of borrowed voices that has been running so long you stopped noticing it was not originally yours. And here is what the noise does. It keeps your attention perpetually on the surface, on the outside, on what is happening, what people think, what comes next, what you should be doing, what you are doing wrong, what you need to fix or achieve or avoid. It keeps your gaze pointed outward so consistently, so automatically, that looking inward starts to feel unnatural, strange, even a little frightening, because inward is where the questions live, the real ones, the ones that do not have easy answers, the ones that noise was very specifically designed, by habit, by culture, by everything around you, to keep buried. Who am I when no one is watching? What do I actually want, separate from what I was told to want? Is the life I am living mine, or did I inherit it without realizing? What would I choose if I were not afraid? These questions are not comfortable. They are destabilizing in the way that only true things can be. And the noise is very good at preventing you from getting anywhere near them. Think about how the day is structured. The alarm wakes you, and immediately the phone is in your hand. Before you have taken 10 breaths, your mind is already filling with input. Messages, news, other people's lives, opinions, images, the day's demands. The noise begins before you have even fully arrived in the morning. And it does not stop. It follows you through every meal, every commute, every break, every quiet moment that might otherwise have offered you a chance to actually hear yourself. The scrolling, the podcasts in the background, the television on while you cook, the constant low hum of stimulation that ensures there is never, truly, a moment of silence. This is not accidental. The world you live in is extraordinarily skilled at capturing your attention and holding it. Every platform, every notification, every piece of content is engineered to pull you slightly further in, to make the next thing feel necessary, to create the sensation that if you stop paying attention for even a moment, you will miss something important. And so you keep paying attention, you keep feeding the noise, and the real work, the interior work that only silence can hold, never gets done. The cost of this is enormous, though it does not show up all at once. It shows up gradually, as a vague feeling of emptiness that entertainment keeps covering but never filling, as the sense that years are passing but something essential is not moving, as the exhaustion of a person who is constantly absorbing but never truly resting, constantly stimulated but never genuinely alive in the moment, as the quiet desperation of someone who has everything they were told to want and still cannot explain why it does not feel like enough. You cannot find yourself in noise. That is simply not where the self lives. The self lives in the quiet, in the space between thoughts when you are not immediately filling it with the next thing, in the moment when you put the phone down and do not pick it up again and sit with whatever rises, in the discomfort of having nothing to distract you from your own company. Most people cannot sit in that silence for more than a few minutes before reaching for something, before opening an app or starting a conversation or finding a task, and the reaching is automatic. They do not even decide to do it. The hand moves before the mind registers the impulse. That is how deeply conditioned the escape from silence has become. But here is what lives in that silence on the other side of the initial discomfort. Not emptiness, not boredom, not the blankness people fear. What lives there is you, the actual you, underneath the noise, underneath the performance, underneath the accumulated weight of everything you have been absorbing and carrying and responding to without pause. The real you is not loud. It does not compete with the noise. It simply waits, patiently, without urgency, in the quiet that most people never allow themselves long enough to reach. And when you finally get there, when you sit long enough, breathe slowly enough, stop filling the space long enough, what you find is not frightening. What you find is familiar in the way that home is familiar. Something that feels like, oh, here I am, I forgot I was here. That recognition is not the end of the work, it is the beginning of it. But you cannot begin anything real until you can hear yourself. And you cannot hear yourself over the noise. This is why reducing the noise is not optional. It is not a luxury for people who have more time or fewer responsibilities. It is the most fundamental requirement of any genuine interior life. It does not mean abandoning the world or living in a cave or pretending that responsibilities do not exist. It means carving out real pockets of silence and protecting them. It means learning to sit with yourself without immediately trying to fix or fill or escape the experience. It means treating your own inner quiet as something worth returning to again and again until the noise loses its grip and something steadier takes its place. The seeds are in the ground. They have been there the whole time. What they need is not more input. What they need is space and quiet, and the kind of attention that only comes when you finally stop running from yourself long enough to simply be here. What awakening actually looks like. People have a very particular picture in their head of what it means to wake up. A dramatic picture, a cinematic one. They imagine a single moment that splits time into before and after. A vision, a crisis that cracks everything open. A teacher who appears at exactly the right moment and says exactly the right words. A retreat in the mountains, a night in the desert. A sudden flood of understanding that rearranges everything in an instant and leaves the person transformed, clear, finally, and completely different from who they were before. That picture is almost never what actually happens, not because awakening is not real. It is very real. But because the picture misunderstands what awakening actually is. It treats awakening as a destination, a fixed point you either reach or you do not, a gate you pass through. And once you are through it, you are awake, and that is that. But awakening is not a destination, it is a direction. It is not something that happens to you once and then is over. It is something you keep choosing, keep returning to, keep practicing across the ordinary texture of daily life. It is not a single moment of thunder. It is the slow, continuous, often unglamorous process of becoming more honest with yourself about what is real. And because it looks nothing like the picture, most people do not recognize it when it is happening to them. They are waiting for the lightning and missing the sunrise that has been building for hours. It looks like this. One morning you catch yourself saying, I am fine, and for the first time in years you actually notice that it is not true, not in a catastrophic way, just not true. The words leave your mouth and something inside you hears them differently than it used to. There is a small gap between the performance and the awareness of the performance, and that gap is everything. That tiny space of honest seeing where you observe yourself rather than simply being the automatic response, that is awakening, showing up quietly in an ordinary morning. It looks like sitting in a room full of people who are laughing and finding that your laughter is slightly delayed. Like you have to remind yourself to join in, like something in you is watching from a small distance, not cold or unkind, just awake, noticing, present in a way that is slightly separate from the flow of the performance everyone around you is part of. It looks like feeling something you do not have a word for, something that sits between grief and gratitude, between loss and possibility, a feeling that is tender and uncomfortable and strangely beautiful all at once, that comes without warning in the middle of ordinary things. A particular quality of afternoon light, a song you have heard 100 times that suddenly reaches somewhere new, a moment with someone you love where you feel both fully present and aware of how temporary it all is. That feeling is not sadness. It is depth. It is the sign of a person who has started to feel the full texture of life, rather than skating across its surface. It looks like your tolerance for certain things quietly dropping without you making a decision about it. The conversations that used to pass the time now feel draining. The environments that used to feel normal now feel loud or hollow or strangely distant from anything that matters. The things you used to chase, that you spent years running toward, now hold your interest differently, still present sometimes, but without the urgency they once had, as though something in you has quietly recalibrated what actually matters, and the old priorities did not survive the recalibration. It looks like new things beginning to hold you, a need for stillness you never had before, an interest in depth you never thought to look for, a pull toward honesty that makes small talk feel like a kind of waste, a sensitivity to beauty and to suffering that was always there, but has become sharper, closer to the surface, less easy to numb, a growing sense that the most important things are not the things most people spend most of their time on. And it looks like confusion. It always looks like some confusion. Because you are in between, you can see more than you used to see, but you do not yet know what to do with all of it. You have outgrown some of your old ways of living, but have not yet built the new ones. You are standing in the middle of a crossing, and you can see the shore you came from, and you can sense, though not yet clearly see, the shore you are moving toward. And the water in between is real and you have to walk through it. That in between is uncomfortable. It is supposed to be, because nothing real is built in comfort. Every genuine transformation passes through a period of not knowing, of uncertainty, of feeling more than you can explain, and seeing more than you can act on yet. The people who push through that discomfort are the ones who eventually arrive somewhere worth being. The people who cannot tolerate it turn back to the familiar shore and call their return wisdom. The single most important thing to understand about awakening is that it is not reserved for exceptional people. It is not a gift given only to those with the right circumstances or the right spiritual background or the right amount of free time. It is available to anyone who is willing to become honest. That is all it requires. Not talent, not special knowledge, not the perfect teacher or the perfect conditions, just the willingness to stop lying to yourself about what you feel, what you want, what is real, and what is performance. Honesty is the first practice, the most fundamental one, and it begins not with some grand declaration, but with the small, daily, deeply courageous act of noticing when the gap appears, when what you feel and what you say, when who you are and how you are living, when what is true and what is convenient do not match, and choosing, in that moment, not to close the gap with a familiar lie. You do not close it all at once. You just keep noticing it, keep feeling it, keep refusing to fully collapse back into the performance. And in that refusal, slowly, the life that is actually yours begins to take shape. Not the life you were handed, not the life that looked good on the outside, the life that is built from the inside out, from what is genuinely true for you, from the quiet, honest voice that the noise almost drowned out completely. That voice is still there, smaller than it should be, maybe, but still there, still patient, still waiting for you to be quiet enough to hear it. That is what awakening actually looks like. Not a lightning bolt, a slow return, a coming home to something you never fully left, that has been waiting for you the entire time. The war between who you were and who you are becoming. Here is the part nobody warns you about. When you begin to change, truly change, from the inside, there will be resistance. And most of that resistance will not come from the outside world. It will not come from your circumstances or your enemies or the difficulty of your situation. Most of it will come from inside you, from the very self that wants to be different, but is also terrified of what different actually means. Because you have an identity, you have a story that has been running inside you for years, maybe for most of your life. A story about who you are, what kind of person you are, what you are capable of, and what you are not, what you deserve, and what is simply not for someone like you. That story was built slowly, across hundreds of experiences and thousands of small moments, shaped by the people who raised you and the environments that surrounded you and the conclusions you drew when you were too young to know that conclusions could be wrong. And that story has weight. It has gravity. It pulls everything toward itself. Every new idea you encounter gets filtered through it. Every opportunity gets measured against it. Every version of yourself that tries to emerge gets evaluated by it. And if the new version does not match the old story, the story pushes back. Hard. This is where most people stop, not because the change was impossible, not because they lacked courage or desire or the right circumstances, but because the internal resistance was so convincing, so familiar, so woven into the texture of their thinking that they mistook it for truth. They heard the voice that said, "Who do you think you are?" And they answered it honestly, "I don't know." And then they went back. The voice is not your enemy, but it is also not your guide. It is the voice of everything you have already been, speaking on behalf of its own survival. Identity resists change the way any living system resists disruption. It is not personal. It is just what identity does. It protects itself. It argues for its own continuation. It looks at the person you are becoming and calls that person dangerous, unrealistic, arrogant, ungrateful. Whatever word has the most power to make you hesitate, and the hesitation is where it wins. Because in the hesitation, you'll go back to the familiar. You pull the old story around you like a coat. You tell yourself it was never really that bad. You find reasons to stay. You call it maturity, or practicality, or humility, and you settle back into the version of yourself that everyone already knows, and that requires nothing from you except your continued disappearance into it. But here is the thing about a war you fight inside yourself. The weapons that work on an outside enemy do not work here. You cannot overpower your own resistance. You cannot argue it into submission or discipline it away, or simply decide hard enough that it will leave. Every time you fight it directly, you give it more energy, you make it more real, you make the old identity feel more under threat, and a threatened identity fights harder. The way through is not force, it is presence. When you are fully present, not in the past where the old story lives, not in the future where the new life has not yet arrived, but here, in this exact moment, in what is actually true right now, the old story loses its footing. It needs you to be somewhere else to maintain its power. It needs you replaying the past or projecting the future. The moment you are simply here, feeling what is real, it has nothing to hold on to. This is what it means to win the war. Not to defeat the old self, not to destroy it or shame it or run from it, but to become so honest, so present, so rooted in what is actually true in this moment that the old story simply becomes less relevant. It does not disappear overnight, but it loses authority. It starts to feel like what it actually is, an old map for territory you no longer live in. The guilt will come, let it come. The doubt will come, let it come. The voice that says you are betraying the people who knew the old you, that you are being selfish, that you are making a mistake, let it speak. You do not have to argue with it. You do not have to prove it wrong. You only have to notice it, recognize it for what it is, and choose, again and again, to move in the direction of what is real. Because here is what that voice never tells you. The people who love you, truly love you, not the version of you they are comfortable with, but actually you, will not be destroyed by your growth. They may be surprised by it. They may be uncomfortable with it for a while. But love that cannot survive you, becoming more honest, is not love that was serving you anyway. And the people who need you to stay small, to feel secure, were never offering you what you thought they were offering. The caterpillar does not argue with the cocoon. It does not negotiate with the process, or demand a guarantee of the outcome before it surrenders to the transformation. It simply goes into the darkness and trusts that what happens in there is not its destruction but its completion. And what comes out on the other side is not a better caterpillar. It is something the caterpillar could not have imagined from within the limitations of its old form. You are in the cocoon. That is what the resistance means. That is what the discomfort of this war between who you were and who you are becoming actually is. Not a sign that something is going wrong, a sign that something is going through. The war does not mean you are losing. It means the transformation is real. It means something genuine is happening beneath the surface of your life, something that the old version of you cannot contain, and that is trying to break through. Let it break through. Stop protecting the old story. Stop explaining yourself to people who cannot yet see what you are moving toward. Stop waiting for permission from the past to step into what is already forming in your present. The person you are becoming does not need the approval of the person you were. It only needs you to keep moving, keep feeling, keep choosing honesty over comfort, one small moment at a time, until one day you look back and realize the war is over. Not because you won, because you outgrew the battlefield entirely. The body knows before the mind does. Your mind is a remarkable thing. It can plan and calculate and analyze and construct arguments of extraordinary sophistication. It can hold multiple ideas at once, project far into the future, learn from the distant past, solve problems of enormous complexity. It is one of the most powerful instruments available to a human being, and it is right to respect it. But when it comes to truth, deep personal truth, the truth of whether you are in the right place, living the right life, moving in a direction that is genuinely yours, the mind is slow. It is compromised. It has too many loyalties. It is too good at building convincing cases for things that are not actually working. It will argue you into staying in situations your whole being knows are wrong. It will construct beautiful logical frameworks to justify fear. It will explain, very reasonably, why the thing your entire body is screaming no to is actually a perfectly sensible choice. The body does not do any of that. The body cannot argue. It cannot rationalize. It cannot construct a narrative designed to protect your self-image or manage how you appear to others. It can only respond, honestly, immediately, without agenda. When something is wrong, the body registers it. When something is right, the body registers that too. It has been doing this your whole life, sending signals with extraordinary consistency, and most people have learned, very carefully, over many years, to override those signals with their mind. Think about the last time you said yes to something when every part of you wanted to say no. Notice what happened in your body in the moment before the yes left your mouth. There was probably a tightening, a slight contraction somewhere in your chest or your stomach, a pulling back, almost physical, as though your body was trying to step away from the thing your mouth was about to agree to. You felt it, and then your mind stepped in with all the reasons why the yes was necessary, practical, polite, expected. And you said yes, and you carried the weight of it afterward without fully understanding where the weight was coming from. That contraction was information, real information, more honest than anything your mind constructed in the seconds that followed. The body speaks in sensations, not in words, not in logical sequences, but in the felt experience of expansion or contraction, openness or closure, ease or resistance. When you are around someone who drains you, you feel it as a heaviness, a tiredness that does not match how much you have physically exerted. When you are doing work that is genuinely yours, that aligns with something real in you, you feel it as a different quality of energy. Not necessarily easy, not without effort, but alive in a way that effort in the wrong direction never is. When you are in a situation that is wrong for you, even if everything about it looks right on paper, there is a quality of tension in the body that does not fully release. No matter how much you try to convince yourself things are fine. These signals are not poetic metaphors. They are physiological realities. The body is processing information about your environment and your experience at a speed and depth that conscious thought cannot match. It is integrated into the world in a way that the thinking mind, which operates one step removed from direct experience, is not. And so it often knows things before the mind has had time to formulate the question. The problem is not that people cannot feel these signals. Almost everyone can feel them if they slow down enough to pay attention. The problem is that almost everyone has been trained, from very early in life, to distrust them, to treat them as unreliable, as emotional noise that needs to be managed and overridden by reason. You were probably taught that feelings get you into trouble. That logic is how decisions should be made, that the body's reactions are impulsive and the mind's analysis wise. But the mind's analysis is wise only when it is working with honest information, and the body is one of the most honest sources of information you have access to. The person who learns to work with both, who uses the mind to examine and understand what the body is already feeling, has access to a depth of intelligence that neither the mind nor the body provides alone. Begin by simply noticing, not changing anything yet, not making decisions based on what you feel, just noticing. When you enter a room, what happens in your body? When a certain name comes up, what is the immediate pre-thought response? When you imagine saying yes versus no to something, which response opens you and which closes you? When you are with a particular person, do you feel larger or smaller than yourself? These are not trivial observations. These are data points about your actual life, about what is genuinely yours and what you have been carrying on behalf of other people's needs, about where you have been living in alignment and where you have been betraying something true in yourself for the sake of something convenient. The body also holds the past in a way the mind cannot fully access. The old fears live in the body. The old contractions, the old ways of bracing and protecting and pulling back. They are stored in the tissue, in the breath patterns, in the way you hold your shoulders and the way you breathe when certain subjects come up. Healing, real healing, is not only a mental process, it is a physical one. It requires the body to be included, to be listened to be allowed to release what the mind long ago decided to simply manage. You do not need a special practice to begin this. You need presence and honesty. You need to stop treating your body as the thing that carries your head around and start treating it as the intelligent, sensitive, extraordinarily honest instrument that it is. The person who learns to read what their body is already telling them stops wasting years walking in directions that their whole being was never willing to follow. They stop ending up in the same patterns and wondering why. They stop overriding the no with logic and then living with the consequences of decisions that were never truly theirs. The body knows. It has always known. The only question is whether you are finally willing to listen. Solitude is not loneliness. There will come a period on this path, perhaps you are already inside one, where you feel alone with what is happening in you. Not dramatically alone, not the kind of alone that announces itself, more quietly than that. You are in a room full of people you have known for years, and something is slightly off. The conversation moves the way it always moves, and you are participating the way you always participate. And on the surface, nothing has changed, but underneath you are somewhere else entirely. You are carrying something they cannot see. Thinking things you do not know how to say. Feeling a kind of distance, not because you do not care about the people around you, but because where you are right now, what you are moving through right now, simply cannot be translated into the language of ordinary conversation. This is the solitude of someone standing at a threshold that others have not yet reached, and it is one of the most misunderstood experiences on the path of genuine change. Most people feel this and immediately conclude that something is wrong, that they are becoming too distant, too strange, too inward. They feel the gap between themselves and the people around them, and they interpret it as failure. Evidence that the change they are moving through is isolating them, cutting them off from connection, making them into someone who cannot belong anywhere. And so they do what feels natural. They try to close the gap. They pull themselves back into the familiar conversational register. They perform the old version of themselves, the one everyone is comfortable with, just to feel less alone for a while. And it works, briefly. The gap closes. The performance is convincing, but afterward there is a deeper tiredness, the tiredness of someone who put on the costume again when they had almost found the courage to take it off for good. The gap you feel is not failure, it is geography. You have moved, Internally, invisibly, but genuinely, you have moved. You are standing somewhere different than you were 6 months ago, a year ago, 5 years ago, and the people around you, through no fault of anyone, are still standing where they were. The distance you feel is simply the distance between where you are and where they are. It is real. It is not a sign that something is broken. It is the natural consequence of growth that has not yet been matched by a corresponding shift in your surroundings. And here is what nobody tells you about that distance. It is not only painful, it is also necessary, because in that space, the space between the old belonging and the new, between the person you were in the eyes of everyone who knows you and the person you are slowly, quietly becoming, something has room to exist that could not exist if you were constantly surrounded by the familiar. That something is your actual self. The self that emerges in solitude is different from the self that emerges in company. In company, even in good company, even with people you love, there is a constant subtle adjustment happening. You are reading the room, you are calibrating your words, you are being shaped slightly by the presence and expectations of others, the way a river is shaped by its banks. This is not a bad thing, it is part of being human, but it means that in company, there is always a version of you that is at least partially constructed for the audience. In solitude, there is no audience. There is no one to perform for, no one to manage, no expectations to navigate. And in that absence, if you are quiet enough and patient enough, what rises is something that belongs entirely to you, your actual thoughts, without the filtering, your actual feelings, without the editing, your actual sense of what matters and what does not, without the influence of everyone else's certainty about how life should be lived. This is why solitude is not a punishment. It is a workshop. It is the place where the real work gets done. Not because being alone is inherently superior to being with others, but because some things can only be built in quiet. Some understanding can only arrive when there is space for it to arrive. Some honesty can only emerge when there is no immediate social consequence to manage. The people throughout history who changed not just themselves, but the world around them, almost always had periods of deep solitude. Not because they were antisocial or damaged or incapable of connection, because they understood, consciously or intuitively, that certain things require space, that you cannot hear the quieter signal when the louder noise is constantly running, that the self worth sharing with others is built, first, in private. The loneliness you may be feeling right now, if you are feeling it, deserves to be looked at, honestly. Because there is a difference between loneliness and solitude, and it is important not to confuse them. Loneliness is the pain of feeling unseen. It is the ache of being in the presence of others and not being known, not being met, not being recognized for who you actually are. Loneliness happens in crowds. It happens in relationships. It happens in rooms full of people who have known you for years but are only familiar with the surface version of you that you have been careful to maintain. Solitude is something else entirely. Solitude is the experience of being with yourself, fully, without performance, without the need to manage how you appear. And when it is genuine solitude rather than forced isolation, it does not produce the ache of loneliness. It produces something closer to relief, the relief of not having to be anything other than what you actually are. The relief of a person who has been performing all day and finally, in private, gets to put everything down. If the solitude you are in right now feels more like loneliness than relief, that is also information. It may mean that the connection you need has not yet arrived, that the people who will genuinely see the person you are becoming have not yet appeared in your life. That is real. And it is worth sitting with honestly rather than trying to fill the gap with connections that do not reach the depth of where you actually are. But do not rush it. Do not reach for company just to silence the unfamiliar quiet of being with yourself. Do not pick up your phone the moment the silence becomes uncomfortable. Do not fill your calendar just to avoid the hours where you would have to sit with your own thoughts. Those thoughts, that silence, that discomfort. They are not your enemy. They are the workshop. They are where the next version of you is being built, quietly, without announcement, in the space that everyone else is too busy or too afraid to enter. The people who are right for where you are going will find you, or you will find them. And when you do, the connection will have a different quality than what you have been used to. Deeper, more honest, less dependent on performance, more capable of holding the full weight of who you actually are. That kind of connection is worth waiting for. It is worth the discomfort of the solitude that precedes it. For now, sit in it, walk in it, let it be what it is. The discomfort will pass, and what remains on the other side of it is something you have needed for a very long time. The simple, quiet, extraordinary experience of finally knowing yourself. What you must let go of there is no path forward that does not ask something of you. And I want to be honest about what that something actually is, because most people misunderstand it. They think the path asks for more effort, more discipline, more sacrifice in the practical sense. Time, money, comfort, convenience. And yes, those things come into it eventually, but they are not what the path is really asking for. They are not the thing that most people find genuinely difficult to give. What the path asks for is something quieter and harder than any of that. It asks you to release your grip on who you have decided you are, on the story you have built around yourself, on the version of yourself that you have been maintaining, defending, explaining, and performing for as long as you can remember. It asks you to open your hand and let that version go, not violently, not with drama, but with the kind of quiet courage that does not get celebrated because nobody else can even see it happening. That is the real ask. And it is enormous, because the version of yourself you have been carrying is not just a story, it is your orientation to the world. It is the lens through which you interpret everything that happens to you. It is the filter that decides what is possible for you and what is not, who you are allowed to become, and who is simply not available to someone like you. It is so deeply embedded in how you see that most of the time you do not even experience it as a story. You experience it as reality, as just the way things are, as truth. And the first thing you must let go of is the conviction that this story is truth. It is not. It is a construction, an accumulation, a series of conclusions drawn in specific moments, under specific conditions, by a version of you that was younger and less experienced, and working with far less information than you have now. Some of those conclusions were useful. Some of them protected you, when protection was what you needed. But you have been carrying them past the point where they serve you, and they have become walls disguised as foundations. They feel like stability. They are actually limitation. The identity built by fear is the one that needs to go first. And you will recognize it because it is the one that was built not around what you genuinely wanted, but around what was safe, around what would keep people close, around what would avoid conflict, avoid rejection, avoid the specific pain that felt at some earlier point in your life, like the most unbearable thing in the world, the version of you that made yourself smaller so others would not feel threatened. That swallowed your real opinions so the room would stay comfortable. That chose the familiar unhappiness of staying over the unfamiliar possibility of leaving, because at least the familiar unhappiness was predictable, and you had learned to survive it. That version of you was not weak. It was adaptive. It was doing exactly what it needed to do in the conditions it was built for. But you are not in those conditions anymore. Or if you are, you no longer have to respond to them the way you once did. You have more now, more understanding, more capacity, more access to your own interior life than you did when that fearful identity was constructed. And carrying it forward into the person you are becoming is like insisting on wearing armor into a room where there is no longer any war. Put the armor down. Not because the fear is gone. The fear may still be there for a while, but because the fear is no longer the most honest thing about you. Something else is more honest now, something that was underneath the armor the entire time, waiting for you to feel safe enough to let it breathe. The next thing you must let go of is the timeline, the invisible schedule that you have somehow internalized about where you should be by now. The sense that the process is taking too long, that other people have figured things out faster, that you are behind, that there is a correct pace for transformation, and you are failing to meet it. There is no schedule, there never was. The timeline is entirely invented, assembled from comparisons, from other people's journeys that you can only ever see the surface of, from a culture that rewards speed and efficiency, and treats slowness as laziness rather than what it often actually is, which is depth. The things that change you most fundamentally do not move on the timeline of productivity. They move on the timeline of readiness, of genuine interior shift. And genuine interior shift cannot be rushed, any more than a season can be rushed. You cannot argue winter into becoming spring. You cannot discipline a seed into flowering before the conditions are right. The tree does not apologize for being a sapling in winter. It does not look at the other trees and feel behind. It does not exhaust itself trying to produce leaves before the ground has thawed and the light has returned. It simply continues to be what it is, doing the invisible underground work that will make the spring growth possible, trusting the process not because it has been guaranteed a good outcome, but because it has no other option. And that absence of option turns out to be a kind of grace. You have been so hard on yourself about the pace, so impatient with your own unfolding, so convinced that the slowness means something has gone wrong, rather than understanding that the slowness is often where the most important work is happening, invisibly, beneath the surface of anything you can yet see or measure or show to anyone else. Let the timeline go, not as resignation, not as giving up on the possibility of change, but as the recognition that the change you are moving toward is real and is already underway and does not need your anxiety about its speed to happen. It needs your presence, it needs your honesty, it needs your willingness to keep showing up for the process, even when the process is not yet producing results you can point to. And the last thing, the one that stops more people than almost anything else, is the need for certainty before you move. The waiting for clarity that is complete before you take the step, the conviction that you should be able to see clearly where you are going before you commit to going there. That the responsible thing, the wise thing, is to wait until you are sure. But certainty almost never comes before the step. That is not how this works. Certainty is not a prerequisite for movement. It is frequently a consequence of it. You take the step into the uncertainty, and the step itself generates information that waiting never could. You move in the direction that feels most honest, most alive, most true to what is real in you right now. Not because you know how it will end, but because staying still in the name of certainty has started to cost more than moving forward in the name of honesty. The path opens as you walk it, not before. The clarity arrives in the walking. The ground appears under the foot that has the courage to step before the ground is visible. That is not recklessness. That is the specific kind of trust that transformation requires, and that no amount of thinking can substitute for. Let go of the certainty. Step anyway. What you are moving toward is more real than what you are leaving behind. And the proof of that will come, not before you move, but because you did. The new reality you have already entered. Here is the truth that lives at the center of everything in this video. The shift has already happened, not partially, not almost, already. Right now, in this moment, in the simple fact that you are here, that you have been sitting with these ideas, that something in you responded to them not as new information, but as recognition, as something you already knew, but had not yet found the words for. That recognition is not nothing. That recognition is everything. It is the sign of a person who has already crossed a threshold, even if they have not yet fully understood what they crossed or what it means for what comes next. The new reality is not waiting for you on the other side of some future achievement. It is not reserved for the version of you that has healed everything and figured everything out and resolved every contradiction. and come. Finally, the complete and finished person you have been imagining you need to become before your real life can begin. That version is a myth. There is no finished version. There is only the one who keeps showing up, keeps moving, keeps choosing honesty over performance, depth over comfort, presence over the familiar numbness of a life lived on automatic. And that person, the one who keeps choosing, is already who you are, not who you will be, who you are. Right now, most people spend their entire lives inside a story they were given before they were old enough to choose it. A story about what the world is, who they are within it, what is available to them and what is not, what is possible for someone from their background, their family, their history, their particular set of experiences and wounds and limitations. That story was given to them by people who were themselves living inside a story they had been given, and it was handed down with complete sincerity, with love even, by people who genuinely believed they were passing on truth rather than one particular, limited, time-bound interpretation of experience. Most people never question the walls of that story. They live within it from birth to death, making their choices inside its logic, measuring their success by its standards, feeling their failures according to its judgments. And the walls feel like reality because they have been there for so long. Because everyone around them is also living inside a similar story. Because to question the walls is to risk everything the story provides: the belonging, the certainty, the sense of knowing who you are and where you stand and what you are supposed to be doing. You have started to question the walls. That is what makes your situation different. Not better in a hierarchical sense, not more advanced or more evolved or more enlightened than the people around you who have not yet started asking these questions. Just different. You have begun to feel the edges of the story you were given. You have started to notice that the walls are there. And once you notice the walls, once you feel them as walls rather than simply as the shape of reality, something irreversible has happened in you. The noticing cannot be undone. The awareness, once opened, does not close. The new reality that you have entered is not a place. It is a way of seeing. It is the capacity to observe your own experience with a quality of awareness that is slightly separate from the experience itself. To watch your own patterns without being completely captured by them. To feel the pull of the old story without automatically following it. To be in the emotion without being entirely consumed by it. To be uncertain without that uncertainty becoming the emergency that it used to be. This capacity is not dramatic. It does not announce itself. It shows up in small moments. The moment when you almost say yes out of habit, and then you pause, actually pause, and feel into whether it is actually yes. The moment when the old fear arrives, and instead of immediately acting from it, or immediately suppressing it, you simply notice it. Oh, there it is, the old contraction, the old protective response, and you have a breath of space between the feeling and the action that was not there before. The moment when someone pushes one of the buttons that used to reliably destabilize you, and you feel the destabilization begin, and then, underneath it, something steady, something that holds. That steadiness is not detachment, it is not coldness or distance or the pretense of not being affected. It is the natural quality of a person who has developed a relationship with their own interior life, who has spent enough time in the quiet, in the honesty, in the willingness to feel what is real, that they have found something underneath the feeling that does not move. Not a wall, not a defense, something more like a root system. Deep enough that the tree can bend in the wind without being pulled from the ground. You have been building that root system. Every moment of genuine honesty has contributed to it. Every time you chose to feel something rather than avoid it. Every time you sat in the solitude rather than filling it. Every time you noticed the performance and stepped even slightly outside of it. All of it has been root work, invisible, underground, slow, essential. The new reality is not about having everything resolved. It is not about having no more pain, or no more confusion, or no more moments of doubt and difficulty. Those things do not disappear. The new reality is not an absence of difficulty. It is a different relationship to difficulty. It is the experience of going through hard things with more of yourself present, more of your actual capacity available, more access to the steadiness underneath the storm. And here is perhaps the most important thing to understand: the shift that has already happened in you. The opening, the questioning, the growing awareness of who you actually are underneath everything you have been performing. That shift is not something you achieved. It is not a reward for effort or a prize for being particularly disciplined or particularly spiritual. It happened because it was ready to happen, because something in you, patient and persistent and absolutely unwilling to be permanently silenced, kept pressing toward the surface until the surface finally gave way. That same something is still pressing, still moving, still pointing in a direction that, if you follow it honestly, will take you somewhere that the old story could never have accommodated. Not because the destination is guaranteed to look a particular way. Not because the path ahead is now clear or easy or free from the kind of difficulty that real living always involves, but because the direction is yours. Genuinely, honestly, originally yours. Not inherited, not performed, not built from fear or shaped entirely by other people's comfort. Yours. That is the new reality. Not a different world, a different you, moving through the world with more of your eyes open, feeling more, seeing more, carrying less of what was never yours to carry, and beginning, slowly, to live in a way that actually matches what is real inside you. That beginning is already here. It has been here the whole time. The only question left is whether you will trust it enough to let it lead. You are questioning. You have already left the room. The only thing left now is to trust the path that opens when you stop pretending you don't see it. You already see it. You have seen it for a while. That is what brought you here. And everything that was described in this video, the old world not fitting, the war between yourselves, the body sending signals, the solitude that teaches, the letting go, that is not a sequence of steps you must complete. It is a map of where you already are. The new reality does not begin when you are ready. It began the moment you stopped being able to pretend the old one was enough. You are already in it. The question now is simply whether you will walk forward with your eyes open. If this found you at the right moment, follow this channel. There is much more waiting for you here.